A baby builds a time machine to skip the pain of growing teeth. A dog tells a small lie to look impressive at a bar. A man skips a single date to chase one wilder night. None of these moments seem to matter at all, and each one quietly reshapes a marriage, a family, a whole country, even the entire universe. Family Guy keeps circling back to the same strange idea that the smallest action can swell into the largest change, and it tells that story over and over through one battered time machine in a baby's bedroom. What follows is a slow, calm walk through every one of those moments, from the oldest to the newest, laid out gently, one bent timeline at a time. Welcome to Red Umbrella. Let's begin. The smallest push. A butterfly opens its wings somewhere quiet. Maybe a garden, maybe a field, maybe a spot no one is even looking at. The wings move once, soft and slow, and they push a tiny bit of air. That little push moves the air next to it. That air moves the air next to that. The motion keeps spreading, growing as it goes, and weeks later, far across the world, a storm rolls in over the sea. No one watching that storm would ever guess that something so small had anything to do with it. That is the idea people call the butterfly effect. A small thing happens, then it touches another thing, and by the end, the world looks different in a way no one could have planned. Most of the time, this idea lives in science books and quiet thoughts late at night. It feels too big and too slow to ever really see. A single choice, a single missed bus, a single word said instead of held back, and a whole life bends in a new direction. People feel it without naming it. They wonder how their lives might have gone if one small day had played out another way. There is a cartoon that keeps poking at this exact idea, and it does it more often than almost any other show on television. The show is Family Guy. From the outside, it looks like a loud, fast, silly comedy about a family in a small town called Quahog. There is the dad, Peter, who is heavy and clumsy and rarely thinks before he acts. There is the mom, Lois, who holds the home together. There are the kids, Meg and Chris. And there is the dog, Brian, who talks and reads and drinks too much wine. And there is the baby, Stewie, who is far smarter than any baby should ever be. He builds machines in his bedroom. He speaks in full sentences. He has plans that stretch across years. Underneath all the jokes, this show returns again and again to one quiet question. What happens when a single small action gets changed? What happens when one tiny push lands in a different spot? Family Guy has asked that question across many seasons, in many different ways, and the answers it gives are some of the strangest and saddest and most surprising stories the show has ever told. Almost every one of these stories needs the same simple tool. Stewie built a time machine. He made it when he was still a baby, back in the early years of the show, and one of his first reasons for building it was small and very human. He hated the pain of growing teeth, so he wanted to skip past it. A baby in pain, wanting an easier day. From that small wish came a machine that can move a person through time, forward or back, with a small return pad that brings the traveler home again. That little pad matters more than it seems. Many of these stories twist and turn around whether the pad still works, whether it has fuel, whether it has been taken or broken or lost. Brian, the family dog, ends up beside Stewie for most of these trips. The two of them make an odd pair. One is a baby with the mind of a mad genius. The other is a dog who wishes he were a great writer and mostly is not. They argue, they tease each other, they get into trouble, and somewhere in the middle of all that bickering, they keep stumbling into the deepest moments the show has to offer. A baby and a dog sitting in a machine, holding the power to change everything by accident. That last word matters. Accident. So many of these changes do not come from some grand evil plan. They come from a slip, a bad mood, a lie told to look cool in front of someone, a door opened by the wrong person at the wrong moment. The show seems fascinated by how little it takes. A person does not need to set out to ruin the world. A person only needs to take one small wrong step, and the rest follows on its own, like that first soft push of butterfly wings. There is a gentle kind of comfort in watching these stories, even when they go to dark places. The world of Family Guy is bright and busy and familiar, like an old room a person has walked through 1,000 times. The same streets, the same house, the same faces. So when one small change reaches in and bends that familiar world into something new, the show lets the change land slowly, almost softly. A future that did not happen, a life that was lost and then found again, a family that was never supposed to exist. The strangeness is wrapped in a warm and well-known shape, which makes it easy to sink into and easy to drift along with. This collection gathers those moments together, from the oldest to the newest, and lays them out one by one. Each one begins with something small. A skipped date, a man walking through the wrong door, a baby in a bad mood after his television gets broken, a dog playing a trick to impress a stranger at a bar. None of these openings feel important while they are happening. That is the whole point. The show hides the size of the change inside something that looks like nothing at all, and then it pulls the thread, and the world unravels and reweaves itself into a shape no one saw coming. What makes Family Guy worth watching for this, more than the average cartoon, is how seriously it takes the weight of these small things, even while it is still making jokes. A lot of shows would use a time machine for one quick laugh and then forget about it by the next scene. This show keeps coming back to the machine, year after year, and keeps using it to ask the same heavy question in new clothes. It treats a tiny choice the way a careful person treats a single domino at the front of a long, curving line. One light light touch and the whole line begins to fall. And the falls go in every direction. Sometimes a small change makes the world better, at least at first. And the comedy comes from how strange a better world can feel. Sometimes a small change tears something apart and leaves a hole that aches. Sometimes a small change wipes a person away completely so that they were never born. And the only one who remembers the old way is the traveler standing alone in a world that does not know them. The show is willing to follow the small push all the way to the end, even when the end is lonely. There is also a quiet trick the show plays with these stories. The change almost always begins with someone trying to make their own life easier or better in the moment. Peter wants one wild night of being young again. Stewie wants to escape a family that drives him crazy. Brian wants to look impressive. Each one reaches for a small, selfish, very ordinary kind of happiness, and the machine grants it. Then it shows them the full cost of what they asked for. The lesson hidden in all of this is soft but firm. The smallest reach for the easy thing can knock loose pieces of the world that no one ever meant to touch. For a person lying in the dark, half awake, there is something steady and slow about this idea. Life can feel like that. A single day can feel like it carries the whole weight of a future inside it. The choices made while tired, while annoyed, while wanting something small, those are the choices that quietly shape the years that follow. Family Guy takes that feeling and gives it a baby with a time machine and a dog who talks, and somehow that silly pair makes the feeling easier to look at. The big and frightening idea gets a soft and familiar face. So this is a calm walkthrough every time the show let a small push grow into a wave. There is no need to rush through any of it. Each story stands on its own. Each one starts in an ordinary place and ends somewhere far from where it began. Together, they form a kind of long, slow proof of the same simple thought the show keeps returning to. In the world of Family Guy, the tiniest things carry the most weight, and the show proves it over and over, gently, one bent timeline at a time. The machine itself stays mostly the same through all of these years. A quiet box of buttons and switches sitting in a baby's bedroom. What changes is the size of the trouble it causes. Early on, the trips feel smaller and more playful. Later, they grow into stories about death, about a whole country falling apart, about the very beginning of everything that exists. The machine grows up alongside the show, and so does the weight of what one wrong move can do with it. Watching them in order is like watching a person learn, slowly and the hard way, that power without care is a dangerous thing to hold. A few of these stories also do something clever with the show itself. Because the time machine can travel through the past, it can travel back into the show's own history, into old episodes and old moments that fans already know by heart. When that happens, the small change does not just bend the world inside the story. It reaches back and touches the show's own memory, its own beginning, its own past mistakes. Those are some of the boldest things the show has ever done, and they will arrive later in this walk, once the simpler trips have set the stage. For now, the only thing worth holding on to is the shape of the idea, a small push, a soft beginning, a change that looks like nothing. And then the slow, spreading result that no one could have stopped once it started. That shape repeats in every story ahead, like a melody that keeps coming back in a long and quiet song. Once that shape is clear, every stop on this trip becomes easy to follow, even with eyes half closed. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The first stop is one of the oldest and one of the simplest. It begins with a tired man at a bar, listening to a friend brag, feeling like he missed out on some wilder life he could have had. All he wants is a single night to do things differently. One night, long ago, in the year 1984, he gets his wish, and a single skip date is all it takes to send everything he loves spinning into the hands of someone else. Section 2, One Night in 1984. It starts in a bar, the way so many of Peter Griffin's worst ideas do. The place is the Drunken Clam, the little spot where Peter and his friends sit and drink and talk away their evenings. On this night, the talk turns to wild stories. Quagmire, the neighbor who has never settled down, brags about all the fun he has had as a single man, all the nights and the freedom and the lack of anyone waiting at home. Peter listens, and a small, heavy feeling settles over him. He married young. He never had that wild stretch of bachelor life. Sitting there, he starts to believe he missed something, that he gave up his fun too soon and traded it away before he ever really had it. That feeling is small and very common. Plenty of grown people carry some quiet version of it, a soft wonder about the life they might have lived if they had waited, or wandered, or chosen something else for a while. The show treats that little ache as the seed of everything that follows, and then it does the thing only this show would do. It brings in death. In Family Guy, Death is a real character, a tall, bony figure in a black robe who shows up now and then to collect people and crack jokes while he does it. On this night, he gets called to the Drunken Clam by a false alarm, a reaping that turns out to be nothing. While he is standing there with nothing to do, he hears Peter moaning about his lost youth, so Death decides to grant the wish. He offers Peter one single night back in the year 1984, a chance to be 18 years old again, and to live that one evening however he pleases. Peter takes the deal, and Brian comes along for the ride. They land in the middle of the 1980s, in a world of old music and old fashion, a time long before the family Peter knows even existed. To everyone around him, Peter looks like his teenage self, young and lighter, and full of the energy he lost decades ago. And he arrives with a plan already set for that night, because the 19-year-old Peter had a date. A movie date with a young woman named Lois, the same Lois he would one day marry, the girl who was supposed to become the center of his whole life. Here is where the small push lands. Cleveland, Peter's calm and steady friend, invites him to skip the movie and come party at a bar instead, and Peter says yes. He cancels the date with Lois and heads off to drink and dance and chase a wilder evening. The choice feels like nothing at all in the moment. A young man picks a party over a quiet date with his girlfriend. It is the kind of choice made by millions of people who never think about it again. No alarm sounds, no warning flashes. The night simply rolls on in its new direction. At the bar, Peter has the wild evening he always dreamed about. He dances, he has fun, and he ends up kissing a famous young movie star of the time, an actress named Molly Ringwald. For one night, he gets to be the carefree single man he heard Quagmire brag about. Then death appears again. The night ends, and Peter is pulled back to the present day, satisfied and grinning, certain that nothing important could possibly have changed. He is wrong, and the size of how wrong sinks in slowly. The present he returns to looks almost like home, but the pieces are all rearranged. The first shock is his marriage. Peter is married to Molly Ringwald, the actress from That Single Night, and the two of them have been together for 20 years. The wild night did not stay a single night. It grew into an entire life with a different person, a whole marriage built on one evening at a bar. Then comes the deeper wound. Lois, the woman Peter loves, the woman who was supposed to be his wife, is married to Quagmire instead. The home is still full of children, but they belong to Quagmire now. Meg, Chris, and Stewie are still there in some form, yet they carry the neighbor's face, his chin, and his nose, and they carry his ways and his little habits too. The children Peter knew are gone, replaced by children who came from someone else, in a family that was never supposed to be. The change does not stop at the front door of the house. It spreads outward into the wider world, far beyond anything Peter touched. In this new version of things, a comedian named Chevy Chase hosts the biggest late-night show on television, a seat he never held in the world Peter remembered. And the country itself has a different leader. Al Gore sits in the highest office as president. One young man skipping one movie date in 1984, and somehow even the head of the entire nation has shifted into someone new. The push that began with a kiss at a bar rippled all the way up to who runs the country. Brian is the one who lays it out plainly. He stands at a chalkboard and draws a single straight line to show the normal path of Peter's life. He marks the spot where Peter met Lois, the spot where they married, and the point that should have led to the present they both knew. Then he points to the night at the bar in 1984. Somewhere in that evening, Brian explains, Peter did something that knocked his whole life off its proper path and bent it onto a new branch, a different chain of events leading to a different now. The drawing makes the idea simple to see. A small bump near the start of the line, and the far end lands in a completely different place. The strangest part of this new world is how good it looks at first glance. The house is nicer, things seem calmer and smoother and richer. By many measures, the version of the world where Peter and Lois never married appears to be an improvement. That detail carries a quiet sting. A small change does not always announce itself as a disaster. Sometimes it dresses up as a better life, which makes the idea of undoing it feel almost foolish. Yet for all the polish of this new world, Peter cannot bear it. A smoother life without Lois is a hollow one for him. The shine on everything else means nothing next to the absence of the person he loves. So Peter goes back to Death and begs for another chance, a return trip to fix what his one careless night broke. Death agrees, with a warning, and sends him once more into the past. This time, Peter arrives with a single goal burning in his mind: keep the date with Lois. Do the simple thing he failed to do before: show up, and he fumbles it. Again and again, Peter blows the very chance he came back to save. He drifts off with Cleveland instead of meeting Lois. He bungles the moment when it counts. Each time he fails, he turns to Death and asks for one more do-over, one more rewind, one more shot at getting it right. Death grows more and more annoyed with the endless requests and finally refuses to keep turning back the clock for him. The easy fix is gone. Peter has to make it work for real, with no more second tries waiting in his pocket. To win, Peter has to understand what truly pushed Lois into Quagmire's arms in the first place. The trail leads to a country club dance. When Peter abandoned the date, Lois was left alone and hurting, and at that dance, Quagmire stepped in to comfort her. A kiss between Lois and Quagmire at the country club was the real moment, the true tipping point that turned her heart toward the neighbor and set the whole new life in motion. That one kiss was the actual butterfly's wing, the soft, small thing that everything else grew from. So Peter and Brian sneak into the country club dance with one mission: stop that kiss. They slip inside and reach the moment before it can happen. The moment where Lois, lonely and let down, is about to fall into the arms of the wrong man. Peter makes sure he is the one there beside her instead. The kiss that would have bound Lois to Quagmire never lands. Lois turns toward Peter the way she was always meant to, and the bent path of history folds slowly back toward its first true shape. When Peter returns to the present this time, the world is right again. Lois is his wife, the children are his children. The home is the home he knew. Sit with how small the first cause really was. Peter did not commit some terrible crime. He did not set out to hurt anyone or wreck a single life. A teenager wanted a fun night and picked a party over a movie date. That was the whole of it. And that one ordinary evening reached forward across more than 20 years, to rewrite a marriage, to replace 3 children with strangers, to put a different host behind a famous desk, and to seat a different man in charge of an entire country. The chain ran from a bar in 1984 all the way to the leader of a nation, and every link in it formed on its own, quietly, with no one steering. This story arrived fairly early in the life of the show, back when its episodes were tighter and its characters easier to follow, and it set the pattern for nearly everything the Time Machine would do in the years that came after. The shape from the very start of this walk repeats here without a single piece missing. A soft beginning, a change that looked like nothing, a spreading wave that no one could stop until someone traveled back and pushed the other way. Peter spent the whole story chasing the easy version of happiness, the wild night, the quick thrill, the painless do-over, and the machine kept showing him the true cost of each easy thing he reached for. There is something gentle in watching it unfold, even with the high stakes underneath. The world stays familiar the whole way through, the same streets and the same faces, just rearranged into a softer wrongness. The fix, when it finally comes, is also small. No grand battle, no huge machine roaring to life. Just a man making sure he stands in the right spot at the right second so that one tiny kiss happens between the right two people. The smallest push broke the world, and an equally small push set it back. That balance, the idea that little things both cause the damage and undo it, sits at the quiet heart of every story still ahead on this trip. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next change does not begin with a wish or a plan or any longing for a wilder life. It begins with a man who simply needs a bathroom and is in a hurry. He rushes through the wrong door, steps into a machine he does not understand at all, and without meaning to, drops himself into one of the most dangerous places and moments in the entire history of the world. Section 3. The Wrong Door. This change begins on a calm night at the Griffin House, with the family gathered around the television to watch the Academy Awards. The big show is on, the one where movie stars hand out golden trophies, and tonight it is being hosted by 2 famous faces with oddly oversized teeth. It is an ordinary evening of sitting and watching, the kind of night where nothing important is supposed to happen. The neighbors have come over to join in, and among them is Mort Goldman, the nervous, fussy man who runs the local pharmacy. Partway through the night, Mort runs into trouble. He desperately needs a bathroom. The main one is taken because Meg is using it, and Mort is in no state to wait, so he hurries off through the house looking for any place he can go, and he ends up rushing into Stewie's room. There, in the corner, he spots what looks to him like a small portable toilet, the kind set up outdoors at fairs and building sites. He does not look closely. He does not stop to wonder why a baby would have such a thing in his bedroom. He simply hurries inside because that is all his panicked mind can think about. The box is not a toilet. It is Stewie's time machine. Stewie, who is far too clever for his age, built the machine back when he was a baby, after he grew bored playing with a toy that made animal sounds. One moment Mort is stepping into what he thinks is a bathroom, and the next the machine wakes up, hums to life, and flings him out of the present and deep into the past. And the small return pad, the little device that brings a traveler safely back home, stays behind. Mort is gone, dropped somewhere in history with no way back, and he does not even understand what has happened to him. Stewie notices right away that his machine has been switched on. Brian goes up to check on Mort and finds the room empty. The pieces come together quickly. Some poor soul has wandered into the machine and vanished into the past. Stewie even gets a little help understanding the situation when a singer named Rick Moranis and a group of backup singers appear and explain the whole thing in a cheerful song, the way only this show would handle a serious problem. Then Stewie grabs the return pad, Brian climbs in beside him, and the two of them set off to chase Mort down and bring him home before he gets himself hurt. What they find on the other end is one of the most dangerous spots in all of history. The machine drops them in the city of Warsaw, in the country of Poland, and they track Mort down inside a synagogue, a Jewish house of worship. It does not take long for the date to sink in. It is the first day of September in the year 1939. That single day is the start of the Second World War. The morning the German army marched into Poland and set the whole world tumbling toward years of fighting. Of all the times and places a frightened pharmacist could land, the machine has dropped him into the opening hour of the deadliest war the world has ever known. The plan should be simple. Grab Mort, use the return pad, go home. Then the trouble doubles. The return pad is broken. The little device that was supposed to carry all 3 of them back to safety will not work. With enemy soldiers pouring into the country and danger rising on every side, Stewie decides the smart move is to get out of Poland and head for England, a safer place where he can try to fix the machine without being caught. Somewhere in here, the show does something that matters a great deal for this whole collection. Stewie turns to Brian and warns him about the danger of touching anything in the past. He tells Brian that even crushing something as tiny as a single mosquito while they are back here could reach forward and change the entire present in ways no one could guess. It is the exact idea at the heart of every story on this trip, the notion that the smallest action in the past can swell into a giant difference later on. For a moment, it seems the show is about to take that idea seriously and walk on careful tiptoes through history. Then Stewie drops the whole thing. He tells Brian he was only kidding, and that the two of them can pretty much do whatever they want back here without worrying about it. The show points straight at the butterfly idea, says it's name out loud and then waves it away with a shrug. That little moment is the show grinning at the very thing these stories usually treat as deadly serious. Here, in this one trip, the giant danger of changing the past gets named and then tossed aside like a joke. It is a strange and almost playful choice, and it makes this story stand apart from the others, where the danger is real and the costs are heavy. What follows is a long, wild chase across war-torn Europe. German soldiers spot the strange pair and come after them, so Stewie, Brian, and Mort flee on a motorbike, roaring through the danger with the enemy close behind. The chase moves from the roads to the sea, where they steal an enemy submarine and dive beneath the waves with more soldiers hunting them through the dark water. It is the kind of breathless run from one near miss to the next that the show loves to build, a baby and a dog and a terrified pharmacist somehow staying one step ahead of an entire army. After all of it, they reach England in one piece. Safe at last, Stewie finally gets a good look at the broken return pad and discovers the real problem. The machine runs on a rare and dangerous metal called uranium, and the pad has run completely out of it. Without that fuel, the machine is dead, and the three travelers are stranded decades before any of them were born. There is only one place in this time and place where such a metal can be found. A secret enemy laboratory hidden away, where scientists are quietly working on a powerful new weapon. To get home, the travelers have to break into that lab and steal the fuel out from under the people building one of the most frightening weapons in history. So they slip into the secret lab, moving carefully past the guards, and they get their hands on the fuel they need. With the rare metal in the pad and the machine humming again, the long ordeal is nearly over. They have survived the start of a world war, a chase across two countries, a dive beneath the sea, and a break-in at an enemy weapons lab, all to rescue one man who only wanted a bathroom. The return pad powers up, and the travelers are pulled back across the years toward the home they left. The way the trip ends is where the small change finally arrives, and it is a quiet, dark little thing. The machine returns them to Stewie's bedroom, but not to the moment they left. It drops them in about 30 seconds before the original Mort ever stepped through that door. So now there are two versions of Mort in play. The frightened, exhausted Mort who traveled through all that danger, and the calm, clueless Mort from 30 seconds in the past who is still out in the hallway, about to come looking for a bathroom. Stewie cannot allow the secret of his machine to get out. He cannot have a grown man running around town telling people that the Griffin baby owns a working time machine. So Stewie quietly removes the problem. He gets rid of the worn-out Mort who came back with them, making sure that version of the man is gone for good, so that no living person will remember the trip or the machine. Then the original Mort, the one who never traveled anywhere, comes hurrying into the room searching for that bathroom. He finds no toilet waiting for him, because the machine that he mistook for one is no longer there to climb into. With nowhere to go and no time left, Mort simply has his accident right there, in his pants, in the present, exactly as if no adventure had ever happened at all. Step back and look at the full shape of it, the entire story. The World War, the chase, the submarine, the stolen fuel, every bit of danger and effort, all of it gets erased so completely that the only mark left on the world is a single embarrassing moment for one man. After threatening that the smallest action could rewrite all of history, the show makes the final change as small and as harmless as it could possibly be. No marriage rearranged, no leader of a country swapped out, no whole new world. Just one man who needed a toilet and did not find one in time. The butterfly opened its wings, and the storm it caused was nothing more than a stain on a pair of trousers. This story landed a little later in the life of the show, by which point the time machine had become a familiar tool that fans expected to see now and then. Stewie and Brian had settled into their roles as the show's travel pair, the genius baby and the long-suffering dog, bouncing off each other through one strange place after another. And this trip plays the whole idea with a lighter, more joking hand than most. The danger is loud and the stakes look huge while they are happening, yet the show keeps winking at the audience the whole way through, treating the giant rules of time travel as something to laugh at rather than fear. There is real comfort in that lighter touch, especially for drifting off to. The story moves fast and the dangers are big, but the show never lets any of it feel truly heavy, because it has already told the audience, through Stewie's little joke, that none of these rules really matter tonight. The travelers run and dodge and survive, and then the slate gets wiped almost perfectly clean, leaving the world right back where it started. It is a long, loud adventure that folds itself up at the end into the smallest possible change, like a wave that rises and crashes and then quietly pulls back out to sea, leaving the sand smooth again. And in its own sideways way, this trip still proves the same point as all the others. Even when the show jokes about the butterfly idea, it cannot fully escape it. Stewie still has to be careful at the end. He still has to clean up the loose thread, the extra Mort, the bit of the past that does not match the present. He cannot simply walk away and let two of the same man exist in the same room. Even in the episode that laughs at the rules still have to be obeyed, quietly, in the final minutes, before the world can be allowed to feel normal again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next change steps away from the past entirely. Instead of traveling backward to fix or to ruin what already happened, the journey turns sideways, into worlds that are running this very moment, right next to this one. In one of them, a single old turn in history went the other way long long ago. And from that one different choice, an entire new reality grew up, a place that looks nothing like the world anyone knows. Section 4. A world with no churches. This time, the journey does not go backward into the past at all. It goes sideways, and it begins, as so many of these stories do, with something that looks completely unimportant: a pig. The day starts at the Quahog Clam Fair, a cheerful little town festival full of games and booths and contests. Stewie enters an animal contest, and he wins it with a pig unlike any pig anyone has seen. This animal is bursting with muscles, packed and bulging in a way no normal farm pig ever could be. It is a strange, almost cartoonish creature, and it takes the top prize with ease. Brian, the family dog, looks at this oddly powerful pig and asks the simple question anyone would ask: where on earth did Stewie find such a thing? Stewie answers in the most casual way possible. He got the pig from a farm. The catch is that the farm is not in this world. It sits in another universe entirely, a different version of reality that runs alongside the one everyone knows. Brian does not believe a word of it, so Stewie brings him home and shows him the secret. In Stewie's hands is a small remote control, a handheld device no bigger than a toy, and with the push of a button, it can carry a person out of this world and into another one. Stewie explains the idea behind it, and the idea is the gentle heart of this whole story. There are not just one or two other worlds out there. There are endless ones, countless versions of reality all existing at the same time, side by side, layered over one another like pages in a thick book. In some of these worlds, things are only a little different from this one. A small detail here, a tiny change there. In others, the differences are enormous, so wide and so deep that the world becomes almost unrecognizable. Every choice that could have gone another way, every turn of history that could have twisted differently, has its own world somewhere out there, quietly playing out. The first place Stewie takes Brian is the farm world, where the muscular pig came from, a place where animals are grown to strange and powerful shapes. Brian, amazed and curious now, wants to see more. So Stewie presses the button again, and the two of them slip into the world that gives this whole section its name: a world with no churches. In this universe, the religion called Christianity never took hold. That single difference, one belief never catching on the way it did, in the world everyone knows, set this reality down a completely separate road. Without that religion shaping the centuries, there were never any long, slow years that historians sometimes call the Dark Ages, a stretch of time when learning and science crawled forward at a painful pace. With nothing holding science back, the people of this world kept inventing and discovering without pause, racing ahead for roughly 1,000 extra years. The result is a world of wonders. The buildings gleam. The technology is far beyond anything in the regular world, the kind of advanced marvels that the regular world might not reach for centuries to come. Sickness and trouble that plague ordinary life have been solved here. Everything is cleaner, smarter, and more astonishing. Even Meg, the Griffin daughter, who is usually treated as plain and overlooked, is beautiful in this world, walking around as a lovely young woman instead of the family outcast. One old idea never spreading, and 1,000 years later there are flying machines and cures and shining cities. That is the butterfly idea, standing right there in full view, grown all the way up into a finished world. Something honest needs to be said about this trip though, because it sets this story apart from the others on this walk. Stewie and Brian do not cause any of these changes. They are not knocking history off its path or breaking anything. They are visitors, tourists, strolling through worlds where the small changes already happened long ago, centuries before they ever arrived. So the No Churches world, with all its glittering wonders, is the clearest and calmest look this show ever gives at the butterfly idea, because it shows the idea as a completed picture rather than a disaster unfolding. Here is what one different turn looks like after it has had 1,000 years to grow. From there, the two of them go wandering, hopping from world to world with the press of a button, and the tour is a gentle, dreamy parade of strange places. They land in a world that looks poorly drawn and rough, where everything is blocky and unfinished, as though the universe itself ran out of hair while being made. They visit a world drawn in the soft, rounded style of old fairy tale cartoons, where Lois looks like a storybook princess and the whole family bursts into a cheerful little song about pie. They drop into a Stone Age world straight out of the days of cavemen, all rock and bone and grunting. They pass through a world where the Great War of the past ended in a different way, where a powerful weapon was never used, and so a different country rose to become the strongest in the world. They even tumble into a world where everything runs backward, and one where Brian and Stewie are not cartoons at all, but real, living people of flesh and blood. Each of these worlds is its own small painting of the butterfly idea. Every one of them is what grew from some single point in history landing differently. A choice made, a war ended, a weapon used or set aside, and from that one fork in the road, a whole new reality spread out and filled itself in. Drifting through them one after another feels like flipping slowly through a picture book of every road history did not take, and there is a soft, hypnotic calm in it, a quiet wonder at how many different shapes the same starting world could have grown into. The trouble, when it finally comes, arrives in a world built for a dog. Stewie and Brian land in a universe where dogs are the masters and humans are the pets. In this world, dogs walk on two legs, run the homes, hold the power, and keep humans on leashes the way the regular world keeps dogs. For Brian, who has spent his whole life as a dog living under humans, this place feels like paradise. Here, his kind is in charge. Here, he matters in a way he never has. Brian falls in love with the dog world and decides he wants to stay. Stewie wants no part of it. He wants to go home. The two of them argue, the way they always do, and in the middle of the fight, the small remote control gets broken. With the only way home shattered in their hands, they are trapped, stuck in the dog world with no button left to press. The easy magic that carried them so lightly from world to world is suddenly gone, and they are stranded among the dog masters. So they do the only thing they can think of. They go, quietly and in disguise, to that world's version of the Griffin house, hoping to find help. Inside, they find the family turned inside out. The Griffins here are all dogs. Living their dog lives in their dog home, and they keep a human as their pet, a human version of Brian who lives the way the dog Brian lives in the regular world. And there is a dog version of Stewie too, a clever dog baby who, it turns out, has invented the very same world-hopping remote control. The trapped travelers finally have a thread of hope. If the dog Stewie will lend them his remote, they can go home. It does not go smoothly. A commotion breaks out in the dog household, a scramble and a scuffle that throws the whole plan into chaos. But through the mess and the noise, the real Stewie and the real Brian manage to get what they need, and the world-hopping remote carries them back at last to their own universe, the regular world, the home they started from. The long, dreamy tour through endless realities comes to an end, and the pair are returned to the familiar streets of Quahog. The story keeps one last dark little joke for the very end, and it is the kind of quiet sting this show loves. The human Brian from the dog world, the pet who lived under the dog Griffins, has followed them back and decides to make a new life for himself here in the regular world. He steps out, full of hope, to cross the street, and almost the instant he sets foot on the road, a car comes through and strikes him down. He lasted only a few minutes in the new world before it ended him. After all the wonder and all the strange beauty of those countless universes, the show closes on the smallest and most ordinary kind of bad luck, a man forgetting to look both ways. This story opened the 8th year of the show, and many fans hold it up as one of the very best episodes ever made. The reasons are easy to feel. The travel pair, the genius baby, and the wine-loving dog are at their sharpest here, bouncing off each other through one bizarre place after another. And the show pours real care into making each world look truly different, switching its whole drawing style from one universe to the next, so that the fairy tale world really looks like a fairy tale, and the rough, unfinished world really looks unfinished. The effect is rich and strange and lovely to sink into. What lingers underneath all the jokes and the wild art is the gentle weight of the central idea. Every world they visit is the child of one small change, one belief that never spread, one war that ended differently, one weapon left in its box. From each of those tiny forks, an entire reality unfolded, complete with its own people and its own history and its own way of living. The show lays them out like a long, quiet gallery and lets the wonder of it settle in. So much, grown from so little. Whole worlds hanging on a single turn. There is comfort in that for a tired mind, because the danger in this story is so light and the wonder is so soft. No one is racing to undo a ruined world. No one is fighting to save a life from being erased. The travelers simply wander, marvel, get briefly stuck, and find their way home. It is the most peaceful stop on this whole trip, a slow float through every road not taken, with only one small dog-shaped detour and one unlucky crossing to break the calm. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next story turns sharper and stranger, and it goes all the way back, further back than any trip so far. It begins with a brother who wants the genius baby gone from the world completely, who travels into the deep past to erase him before he can ever be born. And buried inside that dark errand waits one of the wildest secrets the show ever told, a secret about how the entire universe itself first came to be. Section 5, The Baby Who Made the Stars. This story holds two of the biggest ideas the show ever dared to try, and both of them grow from things small and petty. The first one starts with a joke that did not land. Stewie and Brian are trading insults, the way close friends sometimes do, throwing little jabs back and forth. Brian gets the better of him, and Stewie fails to come up with a good comeback. For most people, losing a silly word fight is the kind of thing forgotten within minutes. For Stewie, with a time machine sitting in his bedroom, it is the start of something far larger. He cannot let it go, so he uses the machine to travel back a few moments and try the comeback again, hoping to win this time. And once he has the machine out, he keeps going. He starts slipping into Brian's past to mess with him, replaying and ruining small, embarrassing moments from the dog's life, including a goofy little dance Brian once did, a bruised pride over a lost argument, and a baby who simply cannot help himself. Brian catches him in the act, climbs into the machine, and the two of them start fighting over the controls. In the struggle, hands slapping at buttons and switches with no idea what they are doing, the machine lurches and breaks down. It does not carry them to a year in history. It throws them somewhere far worse. The place they land is nowhere at all. It is a spot outside of everything, beyond the world, beyond time itself, an empty blank nothing with no rules of any kind. There is no past here, no future, no ground, no sky. The return pad, the little device that always brings them home, is useless because nothing in this empty place works the way it should. Stewie and Brian are stranded in a void, floating in a space that should not even be possible to reach. Stewie comes up with one desperate idea. The return ground pad holds a power core inside it, the part that gives it all its energy. If he pushes that core far past its limit, it will burst in a massive explosion. The blast might be strong enough to throw the two of them back into the real world. It might also kill them both. With no other choice, Stewie does it. He overloads the core, and it explodes with tremendous force, hurling him and Brian out of the empty nothing and back home into the bedroom they started from. Safe again, Stewie does not let the strange event rest. He studies what just happened, measuring the giant burst of energy his return pad gave off out in the void. Then he compares it to the faint trace left behind by the event scientists call the Big Bang, the enormous burst of energy that started the entire universe at the very beginning of time. The two readings match each other exactly, point for point, and Stewie understands the truth, the wild, impossible truth. His little explosion, out in the empty nothing, was the Big Bang. The blast he set off to save his own skin was the very event that created the universe. A baby and a dog, fighting over a time machine, accidentally made everything that exists. Take a slow breath and sit with the size of that. Every star in the sky, every world spinning through space, every living thing that ever drew breath. All of it traces back to a petty squabble over a comeback joke that a baby could not stand to lose. The smallest possible spark, a bruised little ego, set off the largest possible fire, the birth of all creation. The show reaches the very edge of its favorite idea here, pushing the butterfly thought as far as it can go. Nothing in the universe is bigger than the universe, and the show hangs the whole thing on a tiny tantrum. That discovery would be enough for most stories. This one is only getting started, because a second giant idea is about to walk through the door, and it carries the show's darkest version of the small change. His name is Bertram. Bertram is Stewie's evil half-brother, a baby every bit as brilliant as Stewie, who has crossed paths with him before and lost. When Bertram learns that Stewie owns a working time machine, he sees the chance to finally do the one thing he has always wanted. He will erase Stewie from the world for good. Bertram's plan is the butterfly idea turned into a weapon. He does not bother attacking Stewie in the present, where the baby is clever and ready. Instead, he travels far back into the deep past to kill one of Stewie's ancestors, one of the people Stewie is descended from. The thinking is cold and simple. Remove an ancestor, and every single person who would have come after that ancestor never gets born. Pull out one thread near the very beginning of the family line, and the whole line above it, all the way up to Stewie, simply unravels and disappears. Bertram aims his trip at a time hundreds of years ago, in the land of Italy, in an age of great artists and inventors. The ancestor he is hunting is one of the most famous people who ever lived, the artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci. In the world of the show, Da Vinci sits at the root of Stewie's family tree and is the true source of Stewie's enormous cleverness. The two even share the same odd, football-shaped head, a quiet sign of the blood that connects them across the centuries. If Bertram can kill Da Vinci before the family line continues, then Stewie is wiped clean out of history, as though he never existed at all. Stewie and Brian race back through time to stop him. They reach Da Vinci's workshop and find Bertram already there, ready to strike. Stewie pleads with his brother and lays out the full weight of what he is about to do. Killing Da Vinci will not only erase Stewie, it will destroy the entire universe, because Stewie is the one whose explosion created that universe in the first place. With no Stewie, there is no Big Bang, and with no Big Bang, there is no anything. Every star and every world would blink out together, all because of one death in one workshop hundreds of years ago. Bertram does not care. His hatred runs deeper than any warning. Out of pure spite, he kills Da Vinci anyway, doing the very thing they traveled across time to prevent, right in front of their eyes. The ancestor falls. The thread at the root of the family is cut. Stewie throws himself at his brother, and the two of them fight. Bertram gets the upper hand and nearly wins, pinning Stewie down with the end in sight. Then Stewie's hand finds a crossbow, a weapon that shoots arrows, and he turns the fight in an instant. He strikes Bertram down and ends him there in the workshop. The brother who came to erase him is gone. A heavy dread settles over the scene. Da Vinci is dead. The ancestor is gone. By every rule the show has set up, the universe should be coming apart at the seams right now, unraveling into the same empty nothing that Stewie and Brian once floated in. Brian mourns, certain they have failed, certain everything is about to end. And then he notices something that should not be true. The world is still here. The workshop is still standing. The universe did not vanish. Stewie works out why, and his solution is as strange as everything else in this story. There must still be a way for him to be born, so he decides to become his own ancestor, using the tiny inner code inside him, the small stuff that carries exactly who he is. He makes sure his family line continues forward through Da Vinci's girlfriend. He steps neatly into the dead artist's empty place in history, and to survive the long stretch of centuries between that ancient workshop and the present day, Stewie seals himself inside a special tube and freezes himself, falling into a deep frozen sleep that will carry him slowly across hundreds of years until he reaches the modern world. Brian returns to the present alone, with no way of knowing whether any of the mad plan actually worked. The answer arrives in the form of a priest who delivers a letter. The letter was written long ago by someone signing the name Leonardo da Vinci, though the words are plainly Stewie's. It explains that he froze himself in a tube and buried it beneath the Griffin house, waiting all this time to be found. They dig it up, and there he is, whole and alive, the same Stewie, delivered safely into the present by his own frozen patience. As a final touch, he hands Brian a gift carried all the way from Da Vinci's old workshop, a plain little candle, which leaves Brian thoroughly unimpressed after everything they survived. Two enormous ideas, and both of them balance on the thinnest of threads. The universe itself, every star and every world, born from a baby's wounded pride over a joke he lost, and the survival of all that exists, nearly undone by a single death in a single workshop, one ancestor removed in the far distant past. The stakes here climb past anything in the earlier stories. The first stop on this trip rearranged a marriage and swapped out the leader of a country. This one puts the survival of everything on the line and rests it all on small and petty things. A comeback that did not work, a scuffle over some buttons, and one life that ended centuries ago. This came in the 9th year of the show, by which point the time machine had become the tool the writers reached for whenever they wanted to swing as big as possible. The travel pair, the baby and the dog, were carrying the heaviest stories the show could dream up, and somehow keeping them silly at the same time. There is a real charm in watching a cosmic idea, the birth and possible death of the whole universe, handled with the logic of a clever toddler who treats the end of all things as one more problem to solve before bedtime. The enormous and the tiny sit side by side here, comfortable together, and that strange mix is the heart of what makes the story work. For a quiet, drifting mind, the wildness of it has a soothing edge, because the show never lets the cosmic weight crush the gentle, familiar feeling underneath. A baby and his dog get into trouble, fight, fix it in the strangest way imaginable, and end up back home with a candle. The universe was created and nearly destroyed, and the day still closes in a bedroom with a small unwanted gift and a grumbling dog. The biggest story the show ever told folds back down, in the end, into something small enough to hold in one hand. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next trip points the machine somewhere it had never gone before. Not into real history, not into the world of kings and wars and ancient artists, but into the show's own past, its very first episode, the place where the entire story began. And there, in that early beginning, one gentle, well-meaning lie reaches forward across the years and tears the future to pieces. Section 6. Going back to the start. This trip does something none of the others tried. The machine does not point at real history, at kings or wars or ancient artists. It points back at the show itself, at the very first episode, the place where the whole story of this family began. And it starts, the way these things so often do, with something that could not seem smaller, a tennis ball. Brian, the family dog, is showing off an old tennis ball he found, and it gets him thinking. Years ago, 10 years back, he buried another tennis ball somewhere and could never find it again. He says, half wishing, that he would love to know where that old ball ended up. Stewie, always happy to show off his machine, offers a simple solution. He can take Brian back in time to the exact moment the ball was buried, so they can see where it went. A tiny errand for a tiny lost toy. That is the whole reason these two set the machine for the past. The moment they are aiming for sits 10 years back, which lands them at the very first episode of the show, the day everything started. They step out of the machine and into a version of the world that looks strange and rough around the edges. The drawings are simpler and cruder, the way the show looked in its early days before years of polish. The colors and the lines feel older. Even the voices are off. When they come across Meg, the daughter, her voice sounds different from the one Brian and Stewie know, because back in those first days, a different person spoke her lines. The two travelers wander through this older, rougher world like people walking through a faded family photo, pointing out everything that has changed, half amused and half unsettled by seeing their own past laid out around them. There is a soft, eerie wonder in the way the two of them wander through the show's own beginning, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The house they step into is the same house, and yet it is not quite right. The lines are simpler and heavier, the colors flatter, the whole world drawn with less care than the version Stewie and Brian come from, because back in those first days, the show had not yet found its polish. Familiar rooms look slightly off, like a place remembered from early childhood, close enough to know and strange enough to unsettle. The family moves a little differently, the faces sit a touch wrong, and when they come upon Meg, the daughter, her voice does not match the one they know, because in those early days, a different person spoke her lines, and the change lands on them like a small, cold shock. Stewie and Brian drift through all of it, pointing things out to each other, half amused and half uneasy, the way a person feels flipping through old photographs of a home they used to live in. The trip carries them somewhere stranger than any battlefield or ancient ship. It carries them into themselves, into a slow walk around the inside of their own past, through the very first hours of their own story. That tender, uncanny feeling of standing inside a younger version of your own world and barely knowing it gives this whole journey a weight the others never had, and it makes the danger that follows feel like something that should never have been touched. Stewie, as always, lays down the rule before anything can go wrong. They are guests in the past, and they must not touch anything. They must not change a single thing, because the smallest action here could reach forward through the years and twist the present into something no one would recognize. It is the same warning the show keeps coming back to, the same careful line drawn before every trip. Look, but do not touch. Watch, but do not meddle. The danger is named clearly and early, so that everyone understands exactly what is at stake. Then Brian breaks the rule, and he breaks it out lot of kindness. While he is away from Stewie for a moment, off on his own, he runs into his own past self, the Brian who lived back in that first year. And standing there, face to face with himself, knowing what is coming in the years ahead, Brian cannot keep quiet. He knows about a terrible day that lies in the future, the attacks of September the 11th, 2001. A real and painful day in which many innocent people lost their lives. The chance to stop something so awful, to save all those people, is more than his good heart can resist. So he tells his past self what is coming, and how to stop it. And the past Brian, armed with that knowledge, manages to prevent the attacks from ever happening. Stewie has no idea any of this has occurred. The two of them simply finish their visit and travel back home to the present, expecting to find the world exactly as they left it. Brian carries his secret quietly, certain he has done a wonderful thing, certain that by saving all those lives he has only made the world better. The present they return to seems normal enough at first glance. Then the truth begins to surface, piece by piece, mostly through the news playing in the background. Stewie learns what Brian did, and he watches the chain of results unfold like dominoes falling. Because that terrible day never happened, the fear that came with it never gripped the country. Without that fear to lean on, the leader of the time lost his hold on power and was voted out at the next election. And in the years after, the southern part of the country broke away from the rest, splitting off to form its own separate nation, reviving the old divided country from the history books. That split tore the nation in two and set off a second civil war, with Americans fighting Americans all over again. Brian, still clinging to his good intentions, insists that things will work out fine in the long run, that the world will still end up better than the one with the attacks in it. To settle the question, the two of them travel a few years further into the future to see how it all turns out. What they find there is the darkest sight in any of these stories. The country is a ruined, burned-out wasteland, drawn in a cold, lifeless, computer-made style that strips away all the warmth of the usual cartoon. The land has been destroyed by terrible weapons, blasted and poisoned, and millions upon millions of people are dead. Brian's single act of mercy, his one gentle attempt to save thousands of innocent lives, grew quietly into the deaths of far more, into the ruin of the entire country. Take a long moment with that, because it is the heaviest weight the butterfly idea ever carries in this show. Brian did not act out of pride, the way Peter did at the bar, or out of spite, the way Bertram did in the workshop. Brian acted out of love. He saw a chance to spare innocent people from a horror, and he took it. His heart was in exactly the right place, and that loving choice, dropped into the past, swelled and twisted and spread until it became a graveyard stretching from coast to coast. The show makes its hardest point here, the one it has been circling all along. Even kindness can be dangerous when it reaches into the past. Even mercy can set loose a wave that no one can call back. Faced with the ruin he has caused, Brian finally understands, and the two of them throw themselves into trying to undo it. They travel back again to stop the past Brian from ever being told about the coming attacks. The first try fails in a brand new way. Instead of fixing things, Brian ends up changing his own life story, making himself the author of a hugely famous set of magic books, which spins the world off into yet another wrong shape. Each attempt to patch one hole tears open another. Every fix breaks something new. The chaos snowballs from there into one of the strangest sights the show has ever put on screen. As more and more attempts are made, more and more versions of Stewie and Brian come spilling out of all these different broken futures, each pair arriving to fix the mess left by the pair before them. Soon the Griffin driveway is crowded with copies, a whole bickering crowd of Stewies and Brians from countless ruined timelines, all talking over each other, all certain they know the right way to set things straight. The single small lie about a tennis ball trip has multiplied into a mob of duplicates, each one a living piece of a world that went wrong. The way out, when it finally comes, is almost calm in the middle of all that noise. The first Stewie, the original one, gathers all the many future versions of himself and Brian together and puts the question to a vote. Should they prevent the terrible day or not? The crowd votes, and the majority decides no, the attacks should be allowed to happen as they originally did, painful as that truth is. Stewie then orders every last duplicate to stop telling the past about the future, to leave history alone, and to return to their own times and stay there. One by one, the copies obey and vanish back to where they came from. Then Stewie does the final, careful thing. He takes Brian back to a minute before the two of them first arrived in the past on this whole disastrous trip. There he confronts their earlier selves, the pair who are just about to step out and start the chain of ruin, and at the point of a weapon he forces them to turn around and go straight back to the present without touching anything. In the confusion of the standoff, one of the Brians takes a shot to the leg, but it works. The earlier pair return home without meddling, and with that, the whole broken world, the war and the wasteland and the millions of dead, simply ceases to exist, folding up and disappearing as though it was never there. The crowd of duplicates is gone. The ruined futures are gone. History settles back onto its original path. Back in the present, the regular Stewie and Brian, with Brian nursing his wounded leg, sit and talk about how easily they nearly destroyed everything, and how thankful they are to have left the present untouched in the end. The whole enormous catastrophe shrinks back down to two friends on a couch, grateful that the world is still standing. Then Peter wanders in with the 1999 versions of his friends in tow, ready to drink beer and watch television. A small final reminder that the time machine never truly stays put for long. This story arrived arrived in the 10th year of the show, and it stands out for one bold choice above all the others. It was the first time the machine traveled into the show's own past, into its own first episode, letting the characters walk around inside the early, rougher version of their own world. There is a dreamy, almost haunting quality to that, the way it feels to look back at old pictures of yourself and barely recognize the person there. The travelers move through their own beginning like ghosts visiting a house they used to live in, noting every change with a mix of fondness and unease. It should be said plainly that this episode upset a great many people when it first aired. Joking about a real day on which so many people died struck a large part of the audience as a step too far, and the anger followed the show around for years afterward whenever it played again. The makers of the show kept going regardless, and the show stayed on the air for well over a decade more. The strong feelings on both sides are part of the story of this episode, and worth knowing alongside the plot itself. What lingers underneath the controversy and the wild sights is the gentle and terrible heart of the thing. Of all the small pushes in all these stories, Brian's is the one that came from the best place in him. He wanted to save lives. He wanted to spare people pain. And the show, with a steady and unflinching hand, follows that good wish all the way to its end and shows that even the kindest meddling can grow into the worst of all possible worlds. The lesson is hard to sit with, and the show does not soften it much. Sometimes the safest, wisest, most loving thing a person can do with the past is to leave it exactly as it was, painful as that may be, because no one can ever truly know what a single change will grow into. There is still a strange comfort in how it ends, for a mind drifting towards sleep. The ruined world erases itself completely. The millions return to life. The crowd of duplicates fades away. The terrible future is unmade, and the two friends end up right where they started, safe on the couch, a little wiser and a little sorer. The biggest mistake the show ever depicted gets wiped clean, the slate wiped smooth, and the familiar world settles back into place as gently as a tide going out. Even after staring into a wasteland, the story leaves everything tucked neatly back where it belongs. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next trip does something stranger than traveling forward or back. It does not move the travelers through time at all. It makes time itself run the wrong way, undoing the world moment by moment, peeling the days backward one after another. And it carries the genius baby toward the one place none of these stories had ever reached before, the moment of his own beginning, and the very real danger of being unmade entirely, erased not by a brother or a bomb, but by the slow, quiet reversal of time itself. Section 7. The World in Reverse. This story does something none of the others tried. The travelers do not ride the machine forward into days to come, or backward into history. The machine stays right where it is, in Stewie's bedroom, and instead of moving anyone through time, it grabs hold of time itself and makes the whole world run the wrong way. Everything that has already happened begins to come undone, slowly at first, peeling backward one moment at a time, and the small push that sets it all in motion comes from the dog, from a bit of vanity and a clumsy attempt to cover his tracks. It begins with Brian wanting to look impressive. He has discovered that Stewie's time machine makes an unbeatable way to charm the women he meets at bars. One evening, he gets a date to come home with him by promising her something no one else could offer, a ride through time. The two of them slip quietly into Stewie's room while the baby is away, and Brian uses the machine to whisk her off and show her a famous, dramatic moment from history, a night long ago that any history book would remember. It is a showy, reckless way to use a miraculous device, borrowing his roommate's greatest invention to seem like a more exciting dog than he really is. The same small reach for an easy bit of glory that has started so much trouble in these stories shows up here again, this time wearing Brian's face. The real mistake comes afterward, when Brian tries to hide what he has done. He does not want Stewie to know that he has been sneaking off with the machine, borrowing it behind his back to impress strangers. On the machine there is a small dial, a little counter that keeps track of how many years it has traveled, the way the dial in a car keeps track of how far it has driven. Brian figures that if he simply winds that counter back down to where it started, Stewie will never notice the trips he took. So he spins the dial backward, trying to erase the evidence, certain he is doing something harmless and clever. A small lie, tidied up with a small twist of a dial. That is the whole of the push. Winding that dial back does not hide anything. It does something far stranger and far worse. The moment the counter runs backward, time across the entire world begins to run backward with it. The flow of every passing second flips around and starts moving in reverse, undoing the world bit by bit in the exact opposite order from how it happened. Brian notices that something has gone deeply wrong when he looks out at the world around him. People are moving backward. They walk in reverse, step by careful step, retracing paths they already took. Cars roll backward down the streets. Neighbors undo the things they just did, pulling actions back into themselves as though pressing rewind on a tape. The whole town is unspooling, every motion playing out in reverse, and the effect is dreamlike and deeply unsettling, a familiar place gone gently and completely wrong. The reverse world becomes a strange tour through the show's own memory. Famous moments from across the years replay themselves backward. The endless brawl between Peter and the giant chicken, a fight the show has staged many times, comes apart in reverse, the punches pulling back, the wreckage rebuilding rebuilding itself, the whole silly battle unwinding to its quiet start. Peter falls up the stairs instead of down them. Old neighbors who moved away are suddenly back across the street again because time has rolled back to before they ever left. Every well-known piece of the show's history gets pulled backward through the reverse, like a long song being played from the last note to the first. Stewie quickly understands what is happening, and the understanding fills him with dread. Time is unwinding the world, erasing the present by dragging it backward into the past, and there is a terrible logic to where that path leads. If the days keep peeling away in reverse, then sooner or later the reversal will reach the day Stewie himself was born, and then it will carry right on past that day, into the time before he existed at all. The reversal does not stay gentle, it speeds up. Faster and faster the world runs backward, the days flickering past more quickly with every moment, and then, the backward pull reaches the travelers themselves. Stewie begins to grow younger. His teeth, which once came in painfully, slide back into his gums and vanish. His body starts to soften and shrink toward infancy. Before long, he loses the ability to walk, his legs no longer strong enough to hold him because time has dragged him back to an age when he could not yet stand. The clever, scheming baby is being unmade from the outside in, pulled steadily back toward the helpless newborn he once was. The worst truth lands when they see the proof of it around them. A neighbor woman is pregnant again, carrying a child who, in the proper flow of time, was already born and living. That child is becoming unborn, slipping back out of the world, and Stewie sees clearly what waits for him at the end of this. If the machine is not fixed, the reverse will reach his birth and then erase it, and he will be unborn too, gone completely, wiped from the world as though he had never drawn a single breath. It is the same fate Bertram once tried to force on him with a weapon in an ancient workshop, except this time there is no villain to fight. The thing erasing Stewie is time itself, quiet and patient and impossible to punch. Stewie tries to fix his own machine, racing against the backward clock, but the reversal is taking him apart too fast. He grows too young to do the work. His small hands lose their strength and skill, and the relentless pull keeps dragging him backward toward the hospital, toward the very moment of his birth. With the last of his fading ability, he turns to the one creature who can still help, the very one who caused all of this. He charges Brian with the task. Brian must fix the machine alone, or Stewie will cease to exist. There is a heavy fairness in that. Brian's small act of vanity and cover-up started the whole disaster, and now Brian is the only one left who can end it. The friend who broke the world is the only one who can save the friend he nearly erased. So Brian throws himself at the machine, desperate to undo what he set in motion, with time running out behind him in reverse. It does not go smoothly. When Brian reaches the machine and tries to work on it, he runs straight into the protections Stewie built to guard his invention, a security system designed to keep meddling hands away. The very cleverness that makes Stewie who he is now stands in the way of saving him. And all the while, the world keeps unwinding, the backward clock ticking down toward the moment of Stewie's birth, the point of no return drawing closer with every passing second running the wrong way. Then Brian works out the answer, and the answer is simple once he sees it. He caused the reversal by winding the dial backward, so the way to stop it must be to do the exact opposite. He turns the little counter forward instead, pushing it the other way, and the moment he does, time itself flips back to its proper direction. The backward flow halts and reverses again, which means it starts running forward, the way it always should, the world catching itself at the very edge of the cliff. The save comes at the last possible instant, right at the moment Stewie reaches his own birth. Time snaps back into its normal flow just in time for the baby to be born properly, the way he was always meant to be, instead of being swallowed up by the nothing before existence. Brian, having fixed the machine, races to the hospital and arrives just in time to be there for Stewie's birth, the friend showing up at the exact moment that matters most. The world is whole again, running forward, with everyone restored to their proper place and their proper age. The story tucks a tender little moment into the rescue. As the newborn Stewie is brought home from the hospital, Peter speaks to him with unusual warmth, telling the baby that he is going to be the one who saves Peter and Lois's marriage. It is a soft, sweet beat, hidden inside all the chaos, a quiet reminder of why this small life was worth saving from the backward tide. And the show ends on a gentle wink, with Chris announcing that he heard the baby talk, and Lois waving the idea away as nonsense, the family slipping right back into its normal, unknowing rhythm. Look at how small the first cause truly was. Brian did not set out to harm anyone. He wanted to seem impressive, and then he wanted to hide a small embarrassment, so he twisted a dial to cover his track. That is all. A dog tidying up a little lie. And that tiny, vain, very ordinary act nearly ran the entire world backward into nothing, and very nearly erased his own best friend from existence. The pattern that runs through every one of these stories shows itself once more. Someone reaches for a small, easy, selfish thing, a wilder night, a kinder past, a way to look cool, a way to hide a mistake, and the machine answers by revealing the staggering size of what such a small reach can cost. Brian's grab for a little glory at a bar grew into the unmaking of the world. This story carries a special weight beyond its plot, because it was made to mark a milestone. It was celebrated as the 200th episode of the show, a major landmark in a long life on television, and the makers built it as a kind of party. That is part of why the reverse runs through so many of the show's most famous moments, replaying beloved scenes backward one after another. The whole episode episode doubles as a loving look back over everything the show had done up to that point, a long memory played in reverse, which makes it strangely fitting that the story is about time itself running the wrong way. The show turned its own anniversary into a journey backward through its own history. For a mind drifting toward sleep, there is something especially soothing in the shape of this one. The backward world moves slowly and dreamily, full of gentle, hypnotic images of people and cars and famous moments unspooling in reverse. A calm and quiet undoing rather than a loud disaster. And the rescue is just as gentle. No battle, no weapon, no crowd of duplicates. One dog turning one dial back the right way, and the whole world catching itself and flowing forward again, smooth as a held breath finally let go. The story stares at the edge of total erasure, and then steps softly back from it, leaving everyone safe in their beds and their cribs, exactly where they belong. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next story carries the heaviest weight of any on this whole trip, because for once, the machine is not there to save anyone at all. It begins with Stewie deciding, after one too many close calls, to give up the machine for good and destroy it. And it ends with a loss the family cannot undo. A quiet street, a passing car, and the sudden absence of the very friend who shared every single one of these journeys. Section 8. The Dog and the Car. This story carries the heaviest weight of any on this whole trip, and it does so for a reason that turns the usual pattern on its head. In every tale so far, the time machine was the thing that caused the trouble, and also the thing that fixed it. The danger came from the machine, and the rescue came from the machine. Here, for the first time, the machine is gone before the danger arrives, and so there is nothing left to set things right. The small push in this story is the choice to throw the machine away, and the terrible cost of that choice does not show itself until it is far too late. To understand why Stewie gets rid of his greatest invention, it helps to remember everything that came before. Trip after trip, the machine nearly killed him and Brian. It dropped them into the opening hours of a world war. It flung them into an empty nothing outside of existence. It unwound the entire world backward and very nearly erased Stewie from time itself. Their last adventure was one more close call, a journey to the old frontier days of the American West, where the two of them got tangled up handing guns to people, and then had to rush back to take those guns away again before history bent the wrong way. By the time they returned home from that one, Stewie had simply had enough. Too many narrow escapes, too many moments where they barely made it out alive. The machine, for all its wonder, had become a constant threat to both their lives. So Stewie makes a decision that seems wise, even responsible. He destroys the time machine. He takes it apart, hauls the pieces away, and has the remains crushed into scrap at the junkyard. Gone for good. No more reckless trips. No more brushes with death. No more accidentally rewriting the world. From the outside, it looks like the smartest thing he has ever done. A clever baby finally recognizing that some toys are too dangerous to keep. The safety net that had saved them so many times is quietly cut down, and at the moment it happens, no one has any reason to think they will ever need it again. Then comes the small, ordinary thing that changes everything. While they are out, the two of them come across a street hockey net, the kind of simple goal a person sets up in the road for a casual game. They decide to take it home so they can get some exercise. A wholesome little plan. The sort of harmless idea that leads to nothing but a pleasant afternoon. There is no warning in it, no sense of danger, just a dog and a baby bringing home a piece of sports equipment to play with in the street. They set the net up in the road in front of the house. And as they do, a car comes down that quiet street and it strikes Brian. The dog who has shared every one of these journeys, who floated in the empty nothing and ran from soldiers and turned the dial that saved the world, is hit and gravely hurt in the most ordinary way imaginable, in front of his own home, while setting up a hockey net for a game. There is no grand villain here, no war, no monster, no crowd of duplicates, just a street, a car, and a terrible moment of bad luck. The family rushes Brian to the animal doctor, but the damage is too great. He is fading, and everyone can see it, so they gather around him to say their goodbyes. The whole family pressed close, the way families do when there is nothing left to do but be there. Brian holds on just long enough to tell them what they mean to him, to say that he loved being part of this family and was grateful for the life they gave him. He gets to share that, one last time, with the people he cared about most, and then he is gone. The dog dies, surrounded by the family who loved him, in a quiet room far from any adventure. The grief lands hardest on Stewie. The bond between the baby and the dog has been the beating heart of every story on this trip, the friendship that made all the wild journeys feel warm instead of cold. They bickered and teased and drove each other mad, and underneath all of it, they loved each other more than either would easily admit. Now half of that friendship is simply gone, and Stewie blames himself for it. He was there, he was part of it, and the loss sits on him like a stone. Then Stewie's brilliant mind seizes on the one hope that should still exist. He has a time machine. He can go back, return to the moments before the accident, and pull Brian out of the path of that car before it ever reaches him. He can undo this, the way he has undone so much else. The machine has saved them from a war, and from the end of the world, and surely it can save one dog from one street. The hope flares up bright and certain, and then it collapses, because the machine is gone. Stewie destroyed it. He crushed it into scrap at the junkyard only days before, back when he thought the danger was behind them. He tries anyway. He sets out to rebuild it, to gather the rare and special parts he would need to make a new machine and reach back to the moment that matters. But the parts cannot be found. The person who once supplied him is unable to get what he needs, and without those pieces, the machine cannot be rebuilt. Certainly not in time, perhaps not ever. The door that should have been open is sealed shut, and Stewie sealed it himself. The very wisdom that made him give up the dangerous machine is now the reason he cannot bring his friend back. The loss, for the first time in any of these stories, is permanent. There is no trip to take, no dial to turn, no duplicate to gather in the driveway. Brian is gone, and he is going to stay gone. The family holds a funeral. They gather to mourn the dog who was so much more than a pet, and then they try to do the impossible thing of moving on. A month goes by. Life in the house grinds forward without Brian in it, a quiet, dog-shaped hole left in every room. Eventually, Lois gently pushes the family to get a new pet, to fill some of the emptiness, and they go to a pet store to look. There they meet a talking dog named Vinny, a friendly, smooth-talking fellow with a warm way about him, and Peter decides on the spot that Vinny will be their new dog. Vinny comes home and sets about winning everyone over, offering to cook for them, charming his way into their hearts, doing his best to become part of the family. And the family slowly begins to let him. Vinny is kind, Vinny is good to them. Life with a new dog starts to feel almost normal again, but a stranger sits in Brian's spot now, and the friendship that powered all those journeys through time has been quietly replaced by something new and unfamiliar. The house has a dog again, just a different one, and the old bond is a memory the family is learning to carry. Sit with the shape of what happened here, because it is the butterfly idea turned in a direction the show had never pointed it before. In every earlier story, a small action reached out across time and rewrote the world. A skipped date rearranged a marriage. A kind warning ruined a country. A twist of a dial unwound all of history. This time, the small action did a quieter and crueler kind of damage. By destroying the machine, Stewie removed the one tool that could have reversed a tragedy, long before the tragedy ever arrived. The danger he was so wisely running from was also, without his knowing it, his only lifeline. In escaping the thing that kept nearly killing them, he gave up the thing that could have saved them. The smallest sensible choice a person could make carried the heaviest hidden cost of all. There is something almost unbearable in how that connects to everything this trip has covered. The near-death scares that finally pushed Stewie to destroy the machine were the very adventures from the earlier stories. The war and the empty void and the backward world that nearly erased him. Each of those close calls chipped away at his nerve, until he decided the machine was simply too dangerous to keep. He was right to be afraid. The machine truly had almost killed them, again and again. And yet that same dangerous machine was the only thing in the world that could have brought Brian back. The danger and the cure were one and the same, and when Stewie threw away the danger, he threw away the cure without ever realizing he was doing it. His fear was reasonable, his choice was sound, and it still cost him his best friend. This was a story that shook the people watching it in a way few cartoon episodes ever have. Audiences were stunned and heartbroken to see a main character, a dog so many had loved for years, killed off and seemingly gone for good. The show even went so far as to bring in the new dog and act as though the change might be permanent. People were so upset that many of them organized and pleaded for Brian to be returned, signing their names to requests, refusing to accept that the friendly dog was really gone. The loss reached out of the screen and landed on real people who grieved a cartoon character the way they might grieve a friend. This came in the 12th year of the show, and it stands as one of the boldest and most painful risks the writers ever took. To kill a beloved main character, to sit in the grief of it, to let the funeral happen and a month pass and a stranger move into the empty spot takes a real willingness to hurt the audience. Most shows would never dare. This one did, and it let the loss feel genuine, heavy, and final, with no wink to soften it, and no promise that everything would be fine. For a mind drifting towards sleep, this is the saddest stop on the journey, and there is no point pretending otherwise. The story is quiet and tender and full of loss. The brightness of all the earlier adventures dims here into something softer and more sorrowful, a family sitting with an empty space at the table. And yet even in the sadness, there is a strange gentleness to it. Brian got to say goodbye. He got to tell his family he loved them, surrounded by all of them, in a calm and quiet room. The end, when it came, was peaceful and full of love, free of any of the chaos that filled the rest of these tales. The dog who survived a war and the end of the world slipped away gently, held close by the people he cared for. The hardest part is the silence that follows. The weeks of a house learning to live without him, the new dog settling into the old one's place. It feels like an ending, a real one, the kind these stories had always managed to avoid before. The machine that fixed everything is scrap in a junkyard. The friend who shared every trip is buried, and the family, doing its best, begins to move forward into a future without him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The story was not finished though, even if it truly looked that way. The answer, when it finally came, arrived from the one direction no one was watching. Not from rebuilding the machine, not from gathering the rare parts, not from any clever plan of Stewie's. It came weeks later, during the bright bustle of the holiday season, in the most ordinary of places, a crowded shopping mall full of lights and shoppers. It came from a chance glimpse of a familiar face in that crowd, and from a single small wish whispered by a grieving baby to to a department store Santa. Section 9. A Wish at the Mall. The grief did not last forever, though for a while it truly seemed it would. Weeks passed after the loss, and the holiday season rolled into the town, bringing lights and shoppers and the bustle of Christmas. And it is in the middle of all that ordinary holiday cheer, in the least magical place imaginable, a crowded shopping mall, that the most permanent loss in the whole show gets quietly undone. The undoing comes from the smallest things: a face glimpsed in a crowd, a backpack on a child's shoulders, a single push on a quiet street. The same idea that once wrecked marriages and ruined whole countries shows up here in its gentlest form and gives a grieving baby his best friend back. When this story opens, the family has settled into life without Brian. The funeral is over. The month of mourning has passed. Vinny, the friendly new dog, lives in the house now and has done his best to become one of them. The family has moved forward, the way families do, learning to live with the empty space. But Stewie has not truly healed. Underneath the holiday lights and the wrapping paper, he is carrying a quiet, heavy sadness, because this is the first Christmas of his life without the friend who shared everything with him. The season that is supposed to be the happiest of the year only makes the hole feel deeper. Around him, the rest of the family is caught up in the usual holiday tangle. Lois's grumpy father, who has no love for Christmas at all, has gone and canceled the town's Christmas carnival, and Peter throws himself into the task of changing the old man's mind and bringing the carnival back. There is fuss and effort and the ordinary chaos of the Griffins trying to fix a holiday problem, and eventually Peter succeeds and the old man relents and the carnival is allowed to go ahead. But for all the cheer it brings, the carnival does nothing to lift Stewie's spirits. The thing weighing on him cannot be cured by rides and games. The depth of his sadness shows itself when Stewie ends up sitting on the lap of a mall Santa, the kind of holiday figure who asks every child the same simple question: what do you want for Christmas? Most children rattle off a list of toys. Stewie cannot. When he searches himself for an answer, he finds that he does not care about any toy in the world. So he tells the Santa the truth instead. He says that he wants his friend back, his best friend, his dog Brian, who is dead. He says that it is their first Christmas without him, and that no one in the family has even spoken his name. The words pour out of him, raw and honest, the grief of a small child who knows the only thing he wants is the one thing he cannot have. The Santa, of course, is doubtful, because what Stewie is asking for is impossible. All the while, Vinny has been trying so hard to help. The new dog is genuinely kind, and he can see how much Stewie is hurting. He goes to great lengths to cheer the baby up, even attempting to act like Brian, taking on the dead dog's habits, pretending to be a thinker and a writer the way Brian was, offering up gifts to win a smile. None of it works. Vinny is doing everything right, and it still falls short, through no fault of his own, because Stewie's heart is somewhere else entirely, with the friend who is gone. There is a quiet sadness in that too. A good dog pouring out kindness that cannot reach the place where it is needed. Hoping to lift the baby's mood, Vinny takes Stewie out to the mall to do some shopping, just the two of them. And there, moving through the holiday crowd, Stewie sees something that stops him cold. He sees himself. Across the way, among the shoppers, is another Stewie, his own past self from before Brian died, out doing some shopping of his own, buying a toy that presents Stewie suddenly remembers purchasing on that exact day, in the hours before the accident took Brian. The sight is impossible and dizzying. A person standing face to face with his own earlier self. And then Stewie notices the most important detail of all. On the back of that past version of himself is a backpack, and inside that backpack sits the portable return pad of the time machine, the very device Stewie believed was crushed to scrap and lost forever. The realization hits him all at once. The machine was not entirely gone after all. A working piece of it still exists, right here, in the present, carried on the back of a version of himself who has not yet lived through the loss. If present Stewie can get his hands on that return pad, he can travel back to the moment before the car struck Brian, and he can save him. Everything he thought was impossible swings open again, on the strength of one tiny, lucky coincidence: the chance of crossing paths with his own past self in a busy mall on the right day. The rescue of his best friend hangs on a thread that thin. Stewie moves fast, and he turns to Vinny for help. The plan is simple. They need to get the return pad out of that backpack without the past Stewie noticing. So Vinny steps in to distract the younger Stewie, working on his vanity, flattering him, getting him to set the backpack down for a moment, and while the past version is occupied, present Stewie slips the return pad free and takes it. The new dog, the one trying so hard to earn his place in the family, helps with his own hands to bring back the old dog who will take that place away from him. Then comes the moment that gives the whole story its heart. With the return pad in his grip and the rescue finally within reach, Stewie turns to Vinny and tells him the truth about what is going to happen. If this works, if Brian is saved, then Brian never dies. And if Brian never dies, the family never goes to the pet store, never brings Vinny home, never makes him one of their own. The two of them will never have met. Saving Brian means erasing the entire friendship that Stewie and Vinny have built over these past weeks, wiping Vinny out of the family's life completely. Stewie lays this out plainly, knowing what it means. And Vinny, this kind and gentle new dog, does not fight it. He understands exactly what Stewie is choosing, and he understands that he himself is the price of it. He wishes Stewie well and lets him go, giving up his own spot in the family family, his own existence in their lives, so that Stewie can have his heart back. It is one of the most selfless goodbyes the show ever wrote, a dog stepping willingly out of the world so that another dog can return to it. Stewie thanks him, calls him a good dog, and the two of them part. Vinny gives away everything, asking for nothing, simply because it is the right thing to do for a friend in pain. With the goodbye behind him, Stewie sets the return pad for the moment just before the car came down the street, and he travels back. He arrives on that quiet road in the seconds before disaster, with Brian alive and unaware, setting up that hockey net just as he did before. And at the crucial instant, as the car bears down, Stewie does the one small thing that changes everything. He pushes Brian. He shoves his friend out of the path of the oncoming car. A single hard push at exactly the right second. The car passes by. The dog is not struck. Brian lives. That tiny push folds the whole world back around the saved life. Time settles into a new shape, one where the accident never claimed Brian, and the present reforms itself around that single rescued moment. Back home, in the restored present, Brian is alive and well, and the family gathers to celebrate the holidays together whole again with the dog who shared every one of these journeys back in his rightful place. The funeral never happened. The month of mourning never happened. The empty space at the table is filled by the right dog once more, and Vinny is gone from their lives. Exactly as Stewie knew he would be, the cost quietly paid so that the family could be made whole. Look at the scale of what turned on such small hinges. This was the most permanent loss in the entire history of the show, a death that truly seemed final, mourned with a real funeral and weeks of grief and a stranger moving into the empty spot. And it was reversed by the smallest and luckiest of things. A face spotted in a holiday crowd, a backpack on a child's shoulders, a backpack that happened to still hold a piece of a machine everyone thought was destroyed, and then one push, one shove of a dog a few feet to the side on a quiet street. The same butterfly idea that has run through every story on this trip, the notion that the tiniest action carries enormous weight, appears here in its kindest and most healing form. The principle that ruined a marriage and started a war is the very same principle that hands a heartbroken baby his best friend back, alive and warm and home for Christmas. This story is the answer to the one before it, the light that follows the dark. The machine Stewie destroyed in his grief was not the only piece of it left in the world after all. A single return pad survived, forgotten, riding on the back of a version of himself from before the loss, a leftover thread from a happier day. The door Stewie thought he had sealed shut forever turned out to have one small crack left in it, and that one small crack was just enough to let his friend come back through. After a whole story about a tool thrown away and a loss made permanent, the cure was hiding in plain sight, in the past, waiting to be found by a baby desperate enough to look. There is a real-world tale wrapped around this one too, and it is a warm one. The death and the return were planned together from the start. The people who make the show always intended to bring Brian back, and the creator admitted as much afterward, gently teasing the audience for believing, even for a few weeks, that the friendly dog was truly gone for good. The whole painful stretch, the death and the grief and the stranger in his place, was meant as a kind of holiday lesson, a reminder not to take the people and the pets we love for granted, because they can be gone in the blink of an eye, and we may not get the warning. The show broke its viewers' hearts on purpose, and then mended them on purpose, to make a simple point about holding the ones we love a little closer. This came in the same 12th year as the loss it healed, arriving just weeks later, the holiday episode that closed the wound the show had opened in the fall. For a mind drifting towards sleep, it is the most comforting stop on the whole journey, a story of grief gently lifted, of a friend returned, of a family made whole again under the Christmas lights. The sadness of the street and the funeral gives way to the warmth of a home with the right dog back in it, and the quiet, generous goodbye of a new friend who gave up his own place so that an old friend could come home. It is a story about loss, and it ends in the softest possible way, with everyone safe and together, and the worst undone by the smallest of pushes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next story turns the machine toward the hardest target it ever aimed at, the one closest to home. Tired of the very family he lives with, worn out by their noise and their foolishness, Stewie decides to reach back and make sure he was never born to them at all. And he learns that erasing yourself from one family does not set you free. It simply drops you, helpless and new, into the arms of another. Section 10. The family he tried to leave. This story turns the machine toward the hardest target it ever aimed at, the one closest to home. Stewie does not travel back to change a war or save a friend or rescue the world. He travels back to erase himself. Worn down by the very family he lives with, tired of their noise and their foolishness, he decides the simplest fix is to make sure he was never born to them at all. And in trying to escape the family he resents, he learns a hard and gentle truth. Erasing yourself from one life does not set you free. It only drops you, small and new and helpless, into the arms of another. The spark that sets the whole thing off is the smallest and pettiest in this entire collection. Stewie is settled in to watch his favorite show, a fancy, slow-moving British drama full of grand houses and proper manners and quiet, well-mannered people moving through enormous rooms. It is exactly the kind of refined, elegant program Stewie treasures, the sort of thing that makes him feel a cut above the rough world he lives in. He has arranged his afternoon around it. He He is comfortable, content, exactly where he wants to be. And while he sits there enjoying it, Peter and Chris start roughhousing nearby, wrestling and tumbling around with mattresses in a loud, clumsy, mindless game, the kind of brainless fun that fills the Griffin house on any given day. In the middle of their horseplay, the two of them crash straight into the television and smash it to pieces, cutting off Stewie's beloved show right in front of his eyes. It is the kind of small household disaster that happens in homes everywhere. A broken TV, an interrupted program, a flash of pure frustration. For most people, it would be the start of a sour afternoon, forgotten by dinner. For Stewie, it becomes the start of something enormous. His reaction goes far past ordinary anger. Sitting there in the wreckage of his ruined viewing, surrounded by the laughter of the two oafs who just destroyed his peace, Stewie decides he has finally had enough of these people. The broken television is only the last straw on a pile that has been growing for a long time. He cannot stand living among what he sees as a pack of fools, a family too clumsy and too dim to even let him watch his show in quiet. The contrast between the elegant world on the screen and the brainless chaos of the room around him becomes more than he can bear, so he resolves to leave them, and the way he chooses to leave shows just how far his pride and his temper can carry him. He will not move out. He will not run away. He will go back in time and arrange things so that he was never born into this family in the first place. He sets about rebuilding his time machine, crafting a newer and more advanced version than the one before, sleeker and more powerful, all for this single purpose: to undo his own birth and rid himself of the Griffins forever. The size of the plan against the size of the insult tells the whole story of who Stewie is. A broken TV, answered with the unmaking of his own existence. With the new machine ready, Stewie travels back about 3 years to the time just before he was conceived, before he ever became a part of this family. His plan is cold and simple. If he can break Peter and Lois apart before they make him, then he will never be born as their son, and he will be free of them for good. He arrives in the past and settles in to watch the days leading up to his own beginning, studying his parents from the shadows, looking for the cracks he can pry open to drive them apart. What he discovers gives him pause, though it does not stop him. Back in those days, before all the years of arguing and chaos and the weight of raising children, Peter and Lois were genuinely and deeply in love. The bond between them was warm and strong, two people honestly devoted to one another, tender, in a way the present-day couple rarely gets to be. The parents Stewie dismisses as idiots were once a young husband and wife who adored each other, and that devotion is going to make them hard to separate. There is a quiet sadness in watching him look at this real and gentle love and see only an obstacle in his way, a wall to be knocked down so he can get what he wants. The thing he came to destroy is, by any honest measure, beautiful. So Stewie sets to work trying to wreck what they have, and at first he fails again and again, because the love is too solid to break easily. He runs up enormous bills on Lois's accounts, hoping to start a furious fight about money, and the plan backfires on him in embarrassing ways. He shaves Peter completely bald in the night, trying to spark an argument over the sudden, shocking change, and instead Lois simply reassures her husband, tells him she loves him no matter what, and the fight he was counting on never arrives. Every scheme he throws at them bounces off the strength of their bond. The thing Stewie is trying to destroy keeps proving sturdier than he expected, the affection between his parents quietly shrugging off one attack after another. For a baby used to being the cleverest creature in any room, it is a humbling stretch, watching his careful plans crumble against something as simple as two people who love each other. Eventually, though, he finds the wedge that works. He gets rid of Peter's most prized private belongings, giving away the things Peter treasured and hoarded most, and he scrawls rude, ugly things across the walls of their home, and he plants the poisonous idea in both their heads that the other one secretly wants out of the marriage. The flood of hurt and confusion and suspicion finally does what nothing else could. Peter, wounded and convinced the love has died, leaves to go chase a private dream of his own, and the couple comes apart at last. With Peter and Lois no longer together, the chain of events that would have led to Stewie's birth is broken. His original life as a Griffin is erased, wiped out before it could ever begin. Here the story takes its strangest turn, the twist that makes it unlike all the others. Erasing himself does not send Stewie into nothing, does not snuff him out into empty darkness the way he might have expected. Instead, at the very moment he would have been born a Griffin, his soul simply lands somewhere else, in a different cradle, in a different home. He works out that his spirit was passed along to the next baby being born at that exact moment in time, carried forward into a brand new life. And the life he lands in is a grand one. He is reborn as the baby of a wealthy British family, a refined and stately household pulled straight out of the fancy drama he so loved, complete with a sprawling estate, a house full of servants, older brothers, and a whole new name to go with his whole new life. The boy who tried to escape one family wakes up as the cherished seeming child of another, far richer and far grander than the one he left behind. It looks, at first glance, like the dream he always wanted, the elegant world from his television made real around him. For a little while, the rich new life seems exactly that, a dream come true. There is wealth on every side, fine surroundings, the polish and grace he always admired from afar. But the shine wears off with surprising speed, and the cracks begin to show one by one. His new older brothers turn out to be unkind, giving the new baby a hard time the way older siblings sometimes do, teasing and tormenting tormenting him without mercy. His new family is full of clever, capable, well-educated people, which means Stewie is no longer the brilliant one in the house, no longer the secret genius surrounded by simpletons. He is just one smart child among many equally smart ones. His great gift suddenly ordinary, his sharpness lost in a crowd of sharp minds. Worse still, this grand family does not raise their own baby with warmth and closeness the way a loving home does. Stewie is handed off to be brought up by the household staff, by the butler and the servants, kept at a polite and chilly distance from the parents, who are far too busy and far too cold to bother themselves with him. The new father, for all his importance, is a professor at a great university, a man of books and lectures with little time for a baby. And on top of all of it, there is even a small feud brewing under the grand roof, with a baby cousin in the family who, after Stewie accidentally ruins one of his toys, swears to get even and solemnly demands a duel. The truth settles over Stewie slowly and then all at once. He misses his old family. He misses the Griffins with an ache he never saw coming. The very things he hated about them, the foolishness, the chaos, the noise, the endless dim-witted bumbling, turn out to have been wrapped around something he never once appreciated until it was gone. In his old home, surrounded by people who were not nearly as clever as he was, Stewie was special. He was the genius. He was loved, fussed over, central to everything. The brightest spark in a warm and silly house. He mattered there, in a way he simply does not in this grand, clever, frozen new household, where he is just another well-bred child raised by paid hands. The grass that looked so impossibly green on the other side turns out to be cold and lonely up close, all polish and no warmth. He traded away a family that treasured him for one that barely notices he draws breath, and he realizes, with a sinking and homesick heart, that he made a terrible mistake. The loud, foolish life he ran from was the only one in which he was ever truly somebody. So Stewie sets out to fix what he broke, to undo his own clever scheme and find his way back to the Griffins. His new father, the university professor, has a laboratory full of fine equipment, and Stewie quietly puts it to use, building himself a rough new time machine in secret, piece by piece, so he can travel back and repair the very marriage he worked so hard to destroy. He is nearly caught in the act more than once, but in the end he manages to slip away with his crude machine and make his escape into the past. He travels back once more and finds his own past self, the Griffin Stewie, who is still in the middle of tearing his parents apart, still convinced he is doing himself a favor. The two versions of him come face to face, and the newer, wiser, sadder one tells the younger, scheming one all about the miserable rich life waiting at the end of his plan, all about the cold family and the lost specialness, and the deep, gnawing regret. Convinced by his future self, the younger Stewie changes course, and now the two of them work together toward the opposite goal. Instead of breaking Peter and Lois apart, they labor to remind the wavering couple how much they truly love each other, and the way they do it is small and tender, exactly the kind of gentle gesture that has mended so many of these stories. They arrange for Peter's loving note to Lois, a simple handwritten message telling her that he loves her, to be left where she is sure to find it, tucked into the door of the refrigerator, for her to discover during an ordinary moment of an ordinary day. That small sweet reminder reaches the hurt and doubting couple and rekindles the warmth between them. Peter and Lois find their way back to each other. The marriage is saved, and with it, Stewie's birth as a Griffin is restored. The mending of the world carries a quiet cost, the same kind of cost seen once before on this trip. As the proper flow of events knits itself back together, the British version of Stewie, the rich little boy he had briefly become in that grand cold house, fades away and is gently erased. A small life snuffed out so that the right one can return. A falling stage light from one of Peter's silly little projects marks the moment as the British child quietly vanishes from the world. It echoes the goodbye from the story just before, where a kind new dog gave up his place so an old friend could come home. To bring back the life he wanted, Stewie had to end the life he had stumbled into, erasing one version of himself to save another. The rescue, like so many in these tales, is paid for by someone who quietly disappears. Then Stewie is home, a Griffin once more, back among his loud and foolish and loving family, and he is genuinely, deeply happy to be there in a way he never was before he left. A couple of small, funny threads tie themselves off at the end. Chris admits that during the whole long stretch he had been quietly digging through Peter's hidden things the entire time, an unbothered confession that lands with a shrug. And the baby cousin from the rich British family, the one Stewie had wronged and who swore his revenge, somehow manages to reach all the way across to get even at last, catching Stewie with a small wound to the arm. A final little payback that arrives long after anyone expected it, a loose thread from the abandoned life snapping back to sting him one more time. Look at how small the first cause truly was, and how staggeringly far it traveled. The whole enormous ordeal, the erased birth, the broken marriage, the entire alternate life in a different family in a different country with a different name, all of it grew from a single broken television during a single favorite show. The pettiest household annoyance imaginable, a clumsy wrestling match that knocked over a TV set, pushed a proud and frustrated baby to try to wipe out his own existence. The butterfly idea, which had stretched all the way to the birth of the universe and the ruin of an entire nation in earlier stories, points inward here, fire at one small life and one ordinary family. And the change it sets loose is just as huge in its own quiet way, swapping out a whole family, a whole upbringing, a whole sense of who a person is, all on the strength of one bad afternoon and one wounded temper. The lesson hidden inside it is the warmest the show ever offers through this machine. The ordinary, frustrating, foolish life a person already has may be the very thing most worth keeping. The things people resent about their homes and their families, the noise and the mess and the relatives who drive them up the wall, may be tangled up inseparably with the things they would miss the most if those things were ever truly gone. Stewie was certain his family's foolishness was a prison locking him in. He learned that the same foolishness was also the thing that made him feel like the cleverest, most special, most beloved boy in the house, and that no grand estate full of equally clever strangers could ever hand him that feeling. He went searching for a better life and found only an emptier one, all gold and no warmth, and he came running home grateful for the very chaos he had been so desperate to escape. The story carries gentle echoes of nearly everything that came before it on this journey. The grander, colder family is like the dazzling other worlds glimpsed through the multiverse remote, the ones that looked so much brighter and finer from the outside and yet were never home, never the place where a person actually belonged. The marriage broken and then carefully mended recalls the very first stop on this trip, where a couple's love had to be saved to set right the question of who would be born. The erasing and the restoring of a whole version of Stewie echoes the backward world that nearly unmade him moment by moment, and the kind dog who was quietly wiped away so that Brian could come home. And the small, loving gesture that fixes everything in the end, a sweet handwritten note hidden in a refrigerator, fits the soft pattern that runs through all of these tales, where the cure for a giant, world-sized mistake turns out to be something tiny and tender and human, a reminder of love left in an ordinary place. This came as the closing story of the show's 12th year, and it stands as one of the most personal uses the machine was ever put to. There were no soldiers, no villains plotting murder, no crowds of bickering duplicates, no nations falling into ruin. There was only a baby, his family, and the single quiet question of where he truly belonged in the world. The show took its wildest and most dangerous device, a machine that had toppled empires and created the universe itself, and pointed it at the smallest and most human question of all, whether the family a person happens to be born into is worth holding on to, faults and all. The answer it gives is a soft and certain yes, delivered not with a speech but with a homesick baby and a note on a refrigerator door. For a mind drifting toward sleep, this is a tender and reassuring stop, a story about a wanderer who finds his way back home. The cold grandeur of the rich house, with its silent halls and its hired hands and its unkind brothers, gives way in the end to the warm, messy, noisy comfort of the family Stewie started with, the people who love him exactly as he is, foolishness and all. The story wanders far afield, into wealth and loneliness and quiet regret, and then it gently circles all the way back to the front door of the Griffin house, where a loud, clumsy, loving family is waiting, the same as ever, ready to take their genius baby back without ever quite knowing that he was gone, or that he tried to leave, or that he chose, in the end, to come home. So the journey comes to rest where it began, with the smallest push. That is the truth this show keeps returning to, story after story. The tiniest moments carry the heaviest weight. The choices made while tired or annoyed or reaching for something small are the ones that quietly shape everything that follows. And after all the ruined worlds and rescued friends and rewritten lives, the same soft lesson settles over every tale. Hold the ordinary life close, foolish and messy as it is, because it was never as small as it seemed.
If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.